So without further ado, let's bring him up and give him a big round of applause, everybody, Mr. Michael Biehn.
It's very nice of you to come out to listen to me. I don't know what I have to say, but I guess we'll find out in the next couple of minutes. Anybody have a question for me? Maybe? If you have a question for me, I can start talking, and then you just kind of fill up the rest of the time I'm here.
How about, Michael, we kick off with where did it all begin? When did you start? What drew you into the entertainment industry?
Well, I had done, I was in high school, and I did a play in high school, and the dean of the drama department at the University of Arizona happened to see me in a play, and I had done a little bit of community theater when I was real young, but not really very much. But he offered me a scholarship to the University of Arizona. At the time, it was for tuition and for books, which now it's pretty expensive, but then it was kind of gave me a direction. My mother was a doctor, my father's a lawyer, my brother was in law school, and so I took that scholarship when I went to college, and I didn't do well in school. I didn't really pay attention, and I was failing in college, and when I knew that it was just going all wrong, I told my family that I wanted to, that I didn't like college, it wasn't working out for me, that I wanted to move to Los Angeles. And at the time I thought, well, being an actor, I could be out in Los Angeles doing something for 10 years and not, when you go to college, you come home, you get grades, you go to your freshman and your sophomore and you become successful, you graduate from college, then you go to graduate school and you're successful. With actor, being an actor, I'm out in LA, I'm trying to be an actor, what's success really? So it was kind of a odd way it was more like I kind of went in the back door, kind of like as a excuse for not doing well in school and doing well in college, and coming from a family of people that did do well in school. So I went out to Los Angeles, and I worked minimum wage jobs for a year or two. I started taking some acting classes, and I started going out to the agents, the modeling agents, and it's kind of a cute kid 60 years ago or whatever it was, and some of the commercial agents. I had like these 8x10s made up. And after, a couple of years, I started working a little bit, and for me at the time, just tiny little things like getting into the Screen Actors Guild union was like a huge accomplishment, and being in a commercial that ran in a major magazine, like a print ad, it was like a huge thing for me. Or being in a commercial was like a big deal. And I went over. If somebody had told me when I was young, you can make $100,000 a year and be a male model, which I have a lot of friends, or did have a lot of friends who were models, and they were true models. I was more of a print guy. I didn't really work very much as a model or commercials. But if you had told me you make $100,000 a year and be a male model, and so for 40 years or whatever, 20 years, I would have thought, it's the greatest thing in the world. So where I've come, the idea that I have been in movies and starred in movies, Tombstone and the Terminator and Aliens and the Abyss and The Rock and really made a living and be able to support my family. I have five boys. I've been married 3 times, and I've always been able to be that person that has supported the families and sent them off to school, and they're all doing very well. I worked hard, you know, I did work hard, and I still work hard when I'm working, but it's it's almost, I'm just kind of talking to you like I'm talking to myself now. I haven't thought about it in a while, but it's just like amazing that I've gotten to the place that I've gotten to from the kind of meager hopes that I had at the beginning of my acting career or career at all when I was 18 or 19 and I moved out to Los Angeles. And I also, when I moved out to LA, people thought, oh, so brave, you moved away from home. My family lives in the town called Lake Havasu in Arizona. So it's only about 6 hours away. So whenever I got depressed, I could come home on holidays. It wasn't like I was just thrown out there to the wolves. And I always knew if things fell apart, I could always go home. My family could take care of me, so it wasn't really a brave deal. And things just kind of worked out for me. So those my humble beginnings.
Michael, we've got a queue forming over here, plenty of eager questions.
Okay.
But just before that, quick community announcement, everybody. For those who are attending the next presentation with Alex Kingston and you don't have a ticket, you'll have to leave a touch earlier to go and grab one and then join the queue to come back in. Okay? The whole theatre will be vacated at the end of this presentation, okay? But you have to leave a touch earlier. So we have one first from Damien.
Hi, Michael.
Your name's Damien?
Yes, my name is Damien.
This is a good name, man. I love that name.
Thank you very much, and I'm a huge fan, and I believe as an actor, you do not get enough recognition. I love your stuff, man. I grew up watching you as a kid. You are legendary. I'm not kidding, man. Yeah! So I guess the question I have for you today, when was the first time you met Jim?
Well, I had been working a while. I'd done quite a bit of television by the time I met Jim. I had an agent named Ed Lobato who handled Richard Gere. Eventually ended up handling Michelle Pfeiffer, Mel Gibson, Denzel Washington, and on and on and on. And a lot of great people. I don't remember reading the script, but I remember auditioning for Jim. I was told by Bill Paxton. Bill I'd known since Lords of Discipline. He worked with Jim at Roger Corman's company, worked around Jim or knew Jim Cameron, and Bill told me that he had introduced me to Jim at one point. We'd gone to see a movie, and he ran into Joe. Said, "Hi, Jim, how are you?" But I didn't know who he was. And when we did the Terminator, he hadn't done anything. But nobody knew who Jim Cameron was. But I went in, and I remember liking the character of this kind of mean, lean fighting machine, but had this love story twist to it. And I thought, I didn't see the brilliance of that screenplay. In anybody else's hands, that movie could have been kind of ridiculous, but it wasn't. Of course, it was in Jim. So I would say that I met him, it came out in '84. I probably met him in February or March 1983. And I went in and I auditioned for him and Gail Hurd. Gail was, I think, his girlfriend at the time. They eventually got married, and we did Aliens together. And then she also worked with Jim on The Abyss, and so that's how I met Jim. And they offered me the role after I auditioned for them. They offered me the role, and they offered me, because I had a rate that they kind of had to come up with if they wanted me to do the movie, and so the money was pretty good. And what happened was Arnold Schwarzenegger had done Conan the Barbarian, and his option for Conan the Barbarian 2 got picked up by Dino De Laurentiis, and we were going to make the Terminator, and then all of a sudden Arnold was unavailable for 4 months. So we waited 4 months to do the Terminator, and during that period of time, I really got to know Jim. And you don't have to be around Jim very long to realize that there's really something extraordinarily special about him, and I did realize that. And I can remember spending quite a bit of time with Jim and Stan Winston, who was the special effects supervisor of the Terminator and Aliens, and went on to work with Spielberg and won many Academy Awards. He passed away at a pretty young age, but he was a really brilliant guy himself. So by the time I started the Terminator, by the time I started working on it, I'd seen, all these drawings. I'd seen the Terminator leg, the arm, I'd seen the head move, I'd seen how they were doing all these effects. And I think that that's why I really started to take the whole thing very seriously. Because I'd be lying if I said, oh yeah, I read the script, I knew it was going to be like, I don't think maybe Arnold knew that, and maybe Jim Cameron and Gale knew what they had, but nobody else. Nobody thought Arnold Schwarzenegger was going to be a movie star. Nobody thought that movie was going to, even when it came out, I don't even think that it was recognized. A lot of movies, Tombstone being one of them, they come out, and Terminator did well. It was made for, I think, $6 million and made $45 million, but it was not in the top 20 box office movies the year it came out. 1984 was not in the top 20 box office movies. I've always thought that at that time VHS was, everybody was gotten their VHS players, and it was kind of new, but it was cheap, and you could go rent your VHSs. To me, that's how most people saw the Terminator, and and then things go on, and Jim did Aliens, and then The Abyss, and then I think he did True Lies next, but then he did T2, and then it was kind of, that made so much money that. Another thing about Jim Cameron is he's always written and directed and produced his own movies. He although True Lies, I think, was a remake of a French film, which, from what I understand, Arnold brought to him and said, hey, would you like to do this? So that was Arnold's idea, True Lies, which Paxton was also in. Anyway, I'm kind of rambling, so I'll go on to the next question.
One from Tom.
Hi, Michael.
Hi, Tom.
Before I ask a question, continuing on what you were saying before, I did read somewhere that Arnold didn't think Terminator would be good at all at first.
Okay, is that a question? I don't. That's the first time I've ever heard or read that. I don't think anybody. It's very, very hard to predict whether a movie is going to do very well or not. And even sometimes movies come out and they're not appreciated for what they are. And a perfect example of that is Tombstone, which is a movie that it had a lot of problems. When it came out, it got kind of mixed to poor reviews. It didn't do any real box office, which is immediately what makes a movie, if it does a lot of business and stays in theaters for 3 or 4 months, then you know it's going to be a big hit. And it just wasn't. But now, like maybe 93, so whatever, 40 years later, whatever it is, that movie, Tombstone, I'm probably more, especially in the States, but also I noticed it's picked up a lot here, and I hadn't been here before, so, but I also noticed it in Europe, when I'm in Europe, that people seem to identify me more with Johnny Ringo and the character that I played in Tombstone than they do Cowries or Hicks or Coffee or any other character I played before. And that's an interesting one because it was I didn't have a director. There was no director on that movie. Kevin Jones, who was the director of that movie, got fired, and they brought in another director named George Cosmatos, who I didn't really pay any attention to. So that performance, sometimes, I don't think anybody on that movie paid much attention to George. People ask me a lot, I heard Kurt Russell directed that movie, and my answer used to always be, when people would ask me that, was, yeah, he didn't direct me. But when you direct a movie, first of all, there has to be a screenplay. Kevin Jarre wrote that screenplay. Then you have to cast it. Kevin Jarre put that cast together. You're dealing with your DP, your director of photography, you're dealing with locations, you're dealing with, all sorts of issues, wardrobe and, wranglers and horses and revolvers and all this sort of stuff. And to me, Kevin Jarre's more responsible for that movie than anybody else, although Kurt certainly held it together. I have a tremendous amount of respect for Kurt Russell, who was a movie star when he was about this big and has stayed a movie star ever since. And you can't really think of very many people that have been a movie star for 60 years. And so I have tremendous respect for him, but, and had a great cast. There's a lot of that movie that got cut. A lot of stuff that we never got to shoot. A lot of the cowboy stuff after the shootout at OK Corral in the movie all got cut. All the women's roles got cut down. There's a lot of stuff that kind of a lot of the stuff the Cowboys had got cut. A lot of Powers Booth stuff got cut. It never even got shot because of the problems that they had with Kevin directing in the first place. So now I'm starting to ramble a little bit about that. Maybe it's time for a new question.
Was it physically demanding, that era, and also you were climbing mountains, K2, Aliens, were you able to maintain physical stature where you're having a coach, your regime? Was it demanding?
Nothing's ever been really physically demanding for me. I would say, K2, which is a movie about mountain climbing, is that I don't like heights, and so I'm the kind of guy that if that is the edge of the cliff right there, I start getting really shaky about right here. And my legs start trembling when I get about this far away, if that's the edge. And these guys, these mountain climbers, they just put on these rigs and clip in and they just jump over, just over. And I just never could like that whole idea of just stepping off into space and having that little rope, between me and 1,000 feet below. I could never do very well. So I learned to climb, and I could climb reasonably well for a person that was so frightened of heights and also had no knowledge of rock climbing or mountain climbing. What I did though was when I climbed, I would keep my head into the mountain, and I would climb like this, and I just never looked over my shoulder, and I never looked down. I just climb like this, and we'd get to certain spots, and these great climbers that they had around us to protect us. You know, would stop, and they would stop on some little tiny stone, like 1,000 feet up or 2,500 feet up, and they'd be like, hey, turn around, look at the view. I'm like, no, I'm good. You know, I was known for being able to get from the bottom to the top faster than anybody else because I just wanted off. And but that was a fascinating show to work on because we went to Pakistan. We shot in Pakistan. One of the great things about being an actor and being around as long as I have, you know, I started off by going to Prague back when it was in part of the Soviet Union, and I've worked in Ephesus and Turkey and China and you know, on and on and on, Paris and of course London and everywhere in Canada and the Philippines and I just did something in Bangkok, which I'd never been to before, and the traveling has just been really interesting. But I got to see Pakistan at a time, they didn't really, saw a lot of like anti-American graffiti and stuff. While I was there, I didn't quite understand what was going on, but, and we also shot a lot of that in Canada, and there was a lot of helicopter work. Helicopters would pick us up and take us to these great locations. Frank Rodham directed that. Frank, I used to be proud of the fact that I used to work with directors and they would use me more than once. Billy Friedkin used me twice. Frank Rodham did Lords of Discipline with me as kind of the bad guy in that. That's where I met Bill. And then we did K2 together. And then of course I worked with Jim 3 times. And so I was always proud of the fact that that directors would come back to me and work with me more than once. So that's my little chapter there on K2.
Question from Tom.
Michael, I'm sure you probably know a lot of people have a lot of very mixed feelings about the way Alien 3 sort of undoes the ending of Alien 2. But how did you feel when that game a few years ago retconned it so that Hicks doesn't die, so that it wasn't actually him when the ship crashed at the start of Part 3?
Well, that's information. I'm not sure the game you're talking about. You know, when I heard that I was not going to be in Aliens 3, I'm sure I was disappointed. I would have been most disappointed because it would have been a big payday for me. I would have gotten paid a lot of money. And I'm, you know, was disappointed. I mean, I could talk for about half an hour about some of the events that occurred during that time. But I heard that I wasn't going to be in it. I was disappointed. Then I heard that they used my image, and they had a scene where this is the way that it was presented to me by the person who saw it. Hicks' chest burst open with my face, with using my image. They had my image because of that scar they put on my face in Jim's movie, so they had that. So they used my image, and they had the thing bursting out of Hicks's chest. And I heard about that from Raffaella De Laurentiis, who was a producer, who was over in England, and who was at Pinewood Studios and saw it, and she told me about it. So I called the same agent as I talked to you about before, Ed Lomano. Ed Lomano called him up and said, you can't do that. And somebody that I owe a lot to is the kid who plays kind of crazy guy in Back to the Future. Who's that? Crispin Glover. Is it Crispin Glover? Yeah, Crispin Glover, I believe, sued Universal Studios because they tried to use his likeness in, they didn't want to pay him for Back to the Future 2, and so he didn't do it, but they tried to use his likeness, and he sued Spielberg, I believe, and Universal Studios, I believe, and won the lawsuit. So that set a precedent for the fact that they just can't use my image and slap it on anything they want. So they came at me and said, okay, well, how much do you want for this? And I said, this is all true. I said, there's not enough money you can't offer me enough money for the Hicks character, and this is way before, this is so long ago, but there's no way, there's not enough money for you to offer me for Hicks to go out like that. That character was, there's too much of Jim Cameron there's too much of me, there's too much of Bill Paxton, there's too much of Sigourney Weaver in that character. It's never going to happen. You can't pay me enough. And they were offering me a lot of money. And I said, no, just can't do it. They'd already shot the scene, so they already spent the money on it. And so they eventually came back and they said that they wouldn't use that image that way. And I've never seen the third Alien movie. I think they used a photograph of me, and they paid me, and then Hicks, I think somebody told me like some bar crashes on him or something happens to him. Whatever happens in Aliens 3, I don't even know. But they paid me more money to use that picture of me. It was like my headshot. They paid me more money to use that picture of me than I made when I did the original Aliens. when I made the movie. And looking back on it, yeah, I was disappointed. But now, I wouldn't. If I had been in David Fincher's Aliens, it still would have been a mess. It still, just because I was in it or Newt was in it, it was going to be a mess. It's really hard to follow Jim Cameron, and Fincher's not, he's an Academy Award-winning, brilliant director. He's just done all sorts of great things, but he was, from what I understand, it was his first big movie. He had done commercials, and Fox was pushing him all over the place, do this, do that, and he didn't have enough stature to demand what he wanted, and so he made a movie that I've heard him quoted as saying, nobody hates that movie more than I do. And it's understandable. Sometimes you get in situations where you just thought it was going to go a different way. So looking back on it, I'm thrilled, and I know I'm biased. And I know that Alien was also a groundbreaking movie, but I'm biased. I just feel like I'm in the best Alien movie out of that franchise, and that character has not been dissipated or just like gone down by being in the third one, which was bad, or the fourth one, which was not very good, or Covenant, or just to me, I'm in the best one, and
A question from Daniel.
Good day. I'm a huge fan of your work and Far Cry Blood Dragon. Any potential future projects in video game or voiceover work? Thank you. God bless.
Thank you. I'm not a child of video games. I don't really know that much about them. My children, were more of that generation. I knew that when the Aliens games came out, that people that were gamers didn't like it very much. They didn't think they were very good games. I'd never heard of that Blood Dragon. I didn't know what it was. I was approached about doing it. It was kind of a spoof on all the 80s stuff, which I liked. And I liked the fellow that brought me the project, and I thought he was a really smart and fun guy to work for. And we had a lot of fun sort of spoofing the stuff that I had done in the 80s. And from what I understand from gamers, it's a really good game. It's a really good game that people really like it a lot. So I have a lot of people who approach me and ask me about it, like you did, because it must be a really good game. I've never played it. I don't know how to play it. My 7-year-old son, one of my boys would probably know better than me, but I had a lot of fun doing it, and it's kind of fun to look back and spoof. There's some things that, anyway.
Question from Doug.
Yeah.
Hi, Michael.
Hi.
So I guess everyone would agree that Terminator and Terminator 2 are amazeballs.
Or what?
Amazeballs? Don't pretend you don't know what that is. It's the word amazing.
Amazeballs?
Amazeballs.
That's a new one on me. I thought I knew everything, but okay.
Take that back to the States.
Amazeball. All right. Yes, I would agree that they're amazeball.
Yes. Amazeballs.
Balls?
Plural.
Baseballs?
Balls.
Balls, okay. I'm old, my hearing's going too, but you got a question?
I do, yes. Not just a statement.
Okay.
What was I going to ask? Yes, so Terminator and Terminator 2, you had a small cameo in Terminator 2,
Yeah.
which I believe is in the special edition.
Yeah.
I read that you'd been approached to have a cameo in the latest Terminator one. I don't know, I've lost track of just how many there are. They're a bit like aliens have just gone and gone. But is that true that you were approached to have a cameo in the latest Terminator?
No.
Okay.
No. The only time that I've ever been approached about anything to do with aliens and or the Terminator was when I did T2, and Jim brought me in because he wanted me to be in the movie. I went and did that. It was one day's work. I went in, I rehearsed with him and Linda the day before, talked it over a little bit, and I went in, and basically it was kind of, it was a dream sequence, and it was basically Kyle Reese. It's basically the same thing that we had done in the original movie. There was nothing really new about it, but I think, there was a sense of kind of looking back and for her that Jim wanted. And Jim called me at one point. The movie was actually, the trailers were in the theaters, and my image was like running on the trailers, I think, or I believe, in the movie theaters. And Jim called me and said, the movie's just too long, Michael. I've got like a couple other flashbacks in the movie, and I'm just going to have to trim that out. And I was, okay, that's all good. The important thing about that, and that when you see the director's cut, it's in there, is that Jim, at the time, I think really wanted that to be in the movie. The movie can only be so long, and he certainly has to cut it down. There's a lot of things that are special to him, and that's why not these days, for the last 30 years, they've been having director's cuts, because that is the cut that the directors originally wanted the people to see in the movie theaters. That's their cut. And what you end up getting usually is a cross between what a director wants and what the studio wants as far as running time. It seems like the studios back then used to always want shorter films, and the filmmakers always wanted to make longer movies. But T2's, it was a juggernaut, and it did extraordinarily well. And and I got paid well for that too. And my only regret about not being in Terminator 2 was that I never got residuals, and that movie made a fortune. So I probably would have gotten more. I'm sure I would have gotten more in residuals for that than I made when I did the Terminator. So, but say it like